A young apprentice's secret act could reshape an entire world. In the heart of the whispering glade, where ancient trees seem to hold their breath, Lyra makes a choice she knows is forbidden. Her master, the reclusive Rune-Forger Kalin, warned her never to approach the fractured moon rune. He told her its magic was too volatile, its power too dreamlike and untamed for any hand to guide. But Lyra feels driven to prove her worth, to restore the glade's fading dream wisps, those gentle lights that carry the realm's comforting magic. As she lifts her chisel, the very air thrums with a quiet, gathering energy. One careful strike might mend the rune and bring her deepest wish to life, or it could gently pull apart the delicate balance of everything, quietly altering her bond with her only mentor forever. By the end of this journey, through the legends of the Rune-Forgers, you will see how a single moment of courage can gently reshape destiny and weave a new kind of peace into the fabric of all things. I am curious, wherever you are listening from right now, what does the sky look like there tonight? What quiet magic might be resting in the still corners of your own world, waiting for the right hand to invite it awake? The workshop felt smaller than before, the familiar scent of cedar dust and ozone now thick with Lyra's secret. She wiped down each of Kalin's chisels with a frantic care, the cool metal doing nothing to soothe the phantom warmth still humming in her palms. She realigned his sketches, pages filled with the sturdy, predictable forms of root and stone runes, their solid lines a silent reproach to the shimmering fracture she had dared to mend. Every movement was a performance, a desperate attempt to scrub away the evidence of lunar magic clinging to her like the last traces of a beautiful dream. Kalin said nothing upon his return, but his silence was a language she understood perfectly. He moved through their shared space like a quiet presence, his gaze lingering on her just a moment too long before he turned to the cottage door. With a calm focus that was more unnerving than any outburst, he began tracing new, stronger symbols into the door frame, his fingers glowing with a protective amber light. Each new word felt like a wall built between them, a silent question that needed no words to be heard. Lyra's pride in her success was a cold, lonely thing, quickly covered under the heavy weight of her guilt. She flinched at the groan of the floorboards under her own feet, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. When he finally asked what had kept her in the glade so long, the lie was a smooth, practiced stone she had been turning in her pocket all afternoon. "Just practicing my glyphs, master." The words felt like ash in her mouth, and she watched the small trust between them crumble a little more with each syllable. But the magic she had unleashed was not so easily concealed. It pulsed within her, a gentle but persistent beacon. She could feel the attention of the glade turning toward her, a soft and curious focus, and a new, chilling fear took root. If she could feel this new connection, what else might be drawn to its light from the deeper, dreaming shadows of the world? That night, sleep offered no escape. A soft, melodic humming wove its way through her dreams, a sound like crystal bells and wind through leaves, calling her back to the very heart of her transgression. It was a siren song her soul could not ignore. The melody was a thread of silver light, pulling her through the sleeping forest. Lyra did not remember rising from her bed or slipping past the newly warded door, only the irresistible call guiding her feet back to the whispering glade. Under the full moon's gaze, The clearing was transformed. The fractured rune she had mended now pulsed with a soft, steady luminescence, and hovering above it was a being woven from the very fabric of the night. It had the shape of a tall, slender figure, its body a tapestry of shifting starlight and deep, velvety shadow, and from it poured the same crystalline humming that had filled her dreams. This was a dream singer, a creature of legend she had thought only a story Kalin told to illustrate the risks of untamed magic. It turned its luminous, faceless head toward her, and a wave of pure, silent understanding washed over Lyra. It knew her. It knew what she had done. The being extended a hand that seemed made of condensed moonlight, and in its palm rested a sliver of crystallized starlight, no larger than her thumb. It hummed with a quiet, immense potential, a feeling like a captured chord of music waiting to be released. This was a gift, a tangible reward for her courage that made the secret she carried feel both wondrous and deeply significant. Her heart was a battlefield. Awe for this magical entity warred with a quiet fear of Kalin's certain disapproval. To accept this was to step further down a path of secret exploration, away from her master's teachings and toward her own burgeoning independence. But the pull was too strong. Her fingers closed around the crystallized starlight, its gentle vibration seeping into her bones, and she tucked it deep into her pocket, a decision that solidified her new, solitary path. As the dream singer began to fade with the approaching dawn, its final message was not spoken in words, but planted directly in her mind like a seed of understanding. It showed her fleeting images of other, older runes across the realm, their structures webbed with hairline cracks, their light flickering. These were not simple breaks, but signs of a growing instability in the world's foundation, a subtle shift that her actions had now irrevocably connected her to. The walk back to the cottage was a journey through a world that had fundamentally changed. The first rays of sun were touching the treetops as she crept toward the door, hoping to slip inside unseen. But Kalin was already there, waiting on the porch step. He was not pacing, not shouting. He simply sat, his expression unreadable, but his posture was rigid with 1,000 unspoken questions. Kalin's silence stretched between them, a quiet void filled only by the morning bird song. He did not demand, he did not accuse. Instead, he rose and motioned for her to follow him inside, to the single, heavy tome resting on his workbench. He opened it with a reverence that spoke of years of study, his finger tracing a faded illustration of a dream singer. But this image was not one of wonder, it was a warning. The text described how such dream magic, unanchored by the stable, grounding energy of earth runes, could unravel a person's awareness, leaving them adrift in endless waking dreams. His voice was low and heavy, with a concern that felt far more crushing than any anger. He spoke of balance, of the foundational laws that kept their world from dissolving into pure, chaotic imagination. Lyra felt a hot flush of shame, her own secret burning like a brand in her pocket. Yet, as Kalin spoke of caution and rules, a spark of defiance ignited within her. His words felt less like protection and more like a cage, a refusal to see the potential shimmering just beyond the edge of his carefully ordered world. He saw a dangerous fracture, she saw a beautiful repair. He saw a volatile power, she felt an invitation. Their fundamental rift was laid bare, not in a shout, but in the quiet space between his warning and her unspoken belief. "Master, I only went to the glade because I felt called there," she offered, her voice barely a whisper. "It is a partial truth, a carefully constructed shield that hides the crystallized starlight and the silent understanding she shared." The confession hangs in the air, a compromise that satisfies no one. Kalin's eyes narrow slightly, sensing the evasion, but he accepts the sliver of honesty she has offered. His response is not forgiveness, but a lesson. He assigns her a week of transcribing the most basic, tedious runic theory from his oldest and most brittle scrolls. It is a task meant to ground her, to rebuild the foundation he fears she is abandoning. To Lyra, it feels like a sentence. The work is mind-numbing, each stroke of the quill a reminder of the vast, vibrant magic she is being denied. As she grinds the inkstone later that day, the rhythmic, circular motion matching the simmering frustration in her chest, she feels a corresponding pulse from the depths of her pocket. The Starlight shard was humming along with her, a silent, sympathetic companion in her isolation. The ink on her fingers felt like a prison sentence. After hours of transcribing Kalin's rigid runic theories, Lyra's mind ached for something real, something that pulsed with the life she had felt in the glade. During a brief moment alone, she slipped away to the creek bank behind the cottage, the cool dampness of the earth, a welcome relief. In the privacy of the rustling reeds, she finally dared to withdraw the crystallized starlight from its hiding place. It lay cool and heavy in her palm, its inner light shifting like a captured nebula. More out of frustration than hope, she held it up to her eye and peered toward a moss-covered river stone etched with a simple, weathered current rune. The world shifted. Through the shard, the stone was no longer just stone. A faint, silvery lattice of energy became visible, a delicate web clinging to the carving, but it was thin and frayed in places, like a faded embroidery thread. Her breath caught. She moved the shard, looking at a nearby tree marked with a basic growth glyph, and saw the same phenomenon, a dim and flickering light where there should have been a steady, vibrant glow. This was no simple trinket. It was a lens, a key to seeing the true health of the magic woven into the world. A surge of exhilaration washed over her, so potent it made her dizzy. This changed everything. She was not just an apprentice who had broken a rule. She was the only one who could see the slow, quiet fading happening all around them. The temptation was a physical pull, a direct conflict with the stern obedience Kalin demanded. He would call it a reckless shortcut, a corruption of proper study. But how could studying the world's quiet change be wrong? Her decision crystallized with the setting sun. She would use the shard just to map the local runes at twilight. It was not disobedience, she told herself. It was advanced, independent research. The first evening of her secret survey was a revelation and a trial. Peering through the shard for long stretches made her head throb with a dull, persistent ache, as if she were trying to hold a complex melody in her mind for too long. The magical fatigue left her feeling hollowed out, and the boundary between the waking world and the glade's lingering dream magic grew thin and permeable. The rustle of leaves began to sound like distant humming, and once she almost mistook the shimmer of a spider's web for a beckoning, luminous hand. She was walking a knife's edge, her senses blurred by the very power she sought to understand. Her mapping led her away from the familiar creek up a small, forgotten path, tangled with ivy. There, nearly swallowed by the undergrowth, was a small, crumbling shrine made of pale river stones. At its center was a delicately carved fox rune, its elegant lines meant to guide small, clever creatures safely through the woods. But a jagged crack ran through its center, and from the fracture seeped a continuous, sorrowful mist the color of tarnished silver, pooling like quiet dew at the base of the shrine. The sorrowful mist from the fox rune clung to her fingers like cold tears. Kneeling in the damp soil, Lyra saw the jagged crack, not as a simple break, but as a deep pain etched into the ancient oak's roots. Her master's lessons on proper preparation and grounding rituals echoed in her mind, a stark warning against such an impulsive act. But the quiet despair weeping from the stone felt more urgent than any rule. With a steadying breath, she placed her simplest chisel against the fracture, her other hand closing tightly around the crystallized starlight in her pocket. She did not recite a formal incantation, only a whispered promise to the lonely shrine. Please, just be whole again. As she applied the slightest pressure, a trickle of energy flowed not from her, but through the shard, a silvery warmth that guided her hand with an intuition she had never known. The granite seam began to knit itself back together, not with the rough, obvious scar of a forced repair, but with a seamless, luminous thread, as if the stone were remembering its own perfect form. The moment the rune stabilized, the mournful mist shimmered and drew inward, coalescing into a form of light and air. A fox spirit, semi-corporeal and woven from dappled sunlight and shadow, stood before her. It was small, its eyes pools of intelligent, gentle light. It tilted its head, then darted forward to nuzzle her hand with a cool, misty touch, before bounding away into the deepening twilight. In its wake, it left a temporary trail of glittering golden motes that hung in the air like suspended fireflies, a clear and beautiful invitation. Lyra's heart swelled with a triumphant joy so pure it was almost overwhelming. She had done this. She had mended something broken and brought a lost spirit back into the world. Yet, that very joy shifted instantly into a secret she knew she must keep. Telling Kalin would not bring praise. It would bring more scrolls, more warnings, more walls. This accomplishment was hers alone, a private proof that her path, however unorthodox, held its own unique truth. But as the fox spirit vanished, it cast one last glance back over its shoulder, a look that was not merely playful, but deeply knowing. It saw the shimmer of the starlight shard in her essence. It recognized the new thread of dream magic, now woven into her very being. With every rune she mended, she was not just repairing the world, she was stitching herself more firmly into its luminous, hidden tapestry, and becoming more visible to whatever watched from within it. The glittering trail began to fade, and without a second thought, Lyra followed. It led her away from the familiar whispering trees and across a small, forgotten stream into a part of the forest where the very air changed. Here, the scent was sharp and strange. A mix of lightning struck air and the dusty, profound silence of old parchment, a smell that promised ancient things waiting to be read. The trail of golden motes dissolved at the mouth of a cave, hidden behind a curtain of cascading ivy. Inside, the air was cool and hummed with a profound, resonant energy. The walls were not simple stone, they were a living tapestry of light, covered in pulsating runes that shifted and swam like schools of luminous fish. This was the archive of echoes, and the crystallized shard in Lyra's pocket flared with a light so bright it illuminated the cavern like a captured star. She stepped inside, and the runes seemed to lean in, whispering the history of the realm directly into her mind. She saw the age of the first Rune-Forgers, the careful weaving of dream and reality into a single, shimmering fabric. But intertwined with these glorious echoes was a quieter, more unsettling hum, the sound of that fabric beginning to fray. The fractures she had seen in the Fox rune and the Moon rune were not isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a deep, pervasive shift the archive called the Great Forgetting, a slow, quiet fading that was causing the world's essential magic to diminish, leaving only a hollow, ordinary reality in its wake. The sheer scale of it took her breath away. Her small, secret repairs felt like trying to hold back the ocean with a single cupped hand, a gesture both beautiful and deeply humble in the face of such a vast, creeping change. Her wish to make a difference felt like a tiny, flickering candle in an immense and growing twilight. Her eyes, searching for an answer, scanned the swirling walls until they settled on a central, intricately woven sequence of runes that pulsed with a steadier, more resilient light than the others. The knowledge of its purpose settled in her mind without words. This was the schematic for an anchor rune, a foundational symbol of immense power designed to stabilize the entire magical network, to give the fading dream a fixed point to hold on to. The challenge of attempting such a thing was beyond anything she could comprehend, but the consequence of doing nothing was a future without wonder, without the gentle hum of magic in the glades, a world utterly quieted. This was no longer about proving herself to Kalin. It was a cosmic effort for the heart of her world. With a trembling hand, she pulled a stick of charcoal and a scrap of parchment from her pocket. Her movements focused as she began to trace the impossibly complex sequence. Glyph by glyph, she committed the anchor rune to memory, her mind straining under the weight of its intricate logic. As she traced the final, crucial curve, a deep, resonant tremor ran through the cave itself. The runes on the walls flickered intensely, as if in caution, and the very ground beneath her feet seemed to shift with a sudden, profound uncertainty. The tremor was not the cave shifting, but the arrival of its guardian. A being of living granite and ancient moss rose from the stone floor, its monolithic form blocking the exit. This was the Warden, a sentinel tasked with preserving the archive's sacred solitude. Its eyes, two deep pools of obsidian, fixed on Lyra, and it took a heavy step forward, the grind of its stone feet, a clear signal of its purpose. Halt, little thief of echoes. Its voice was the sound of a mountainside cracking, a low boom that vibrated in her bones. Lyra did not think, she only moved. She scrambled backward, the precious scrap of parchment with the anchor rune clutched in her fist, and burst from the cave into the forest. The Warden gave pursuit, its strides slow but impossibly long, each footfall shaking the ground. This was no longer a quiet exploration. It was a desperate, heart-pounding flight. She wove between trees, using her small size and agility to her advantage, leading the stone giant on a frantic chase away from the creek, away from the familiar path that led home. She would not lead this danger to Kalin's door. The booming commands followed her, a relentless echo that chased her deeper into the woods than she had ever dared to go. Branches snatched at her clothes, and the air grew thick and damp. Finally, throwing herself into the hollow of a fallen log, she pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to quiet the sound of her ragged breathing. The Warden's heavy steps crunched past, then faded into the distance. Silence returned, but it was a heavy, wet silence. Peering out from her hiding place, Lyra saw twisted, skeletal trees rising from still, black water. A sickly green mist clung to the ground. Her blood ran cold. In her flight, the Warden had driven her straight into the heart of the Murmuring Bog, a place Kalin had described only once, his voice uncharacteristically grim, and had forbidden her from ever entering. The bog's chill seeped into her bones, a damp discomfort that made every step a struggle through the clinging, heavy mud. Exhausted and utterly lost, Lyra pushed through a final curtain of slime-covered reeds and stumbled onto a small, dry island of solid ground. At its center stood a single, smooth river stone, and upon it was carved a frog rune, its lines so perfectly intact they seemed to hum with a quiet, steady presence. A calm, soothing aura radiated from the carving, pushing back the bog's oppressive green mist and the subtle, unsettling whispers that seemed to coil at the edge of hearing. Here, the air was clean, the ground was firm, and for the first time since her frantic flight began, she could draw a full, unburdened breath. This small sanctuary repelled the bog's natural decay, and she realized with a wave of relief that it would also mask her from the Warden's stone gaze. She settled within its protective bubble, her body trembling not just from cold, but from the heavy weight of her own fear and isolation. The cozy, gentle magic of the frog rune was a stark and almost painful contrast to the terrifying chase that had led her here, a quiet kindness that made her feel both profoundly grateful and completely alone. Her mind replayed the stone giant's booming voice, the sudden lurch of the ground, the sheer scale of the challenge she now faced. A deep weariness threatened to pull her under, a heavier burden than any the bog could offer. How could she, one apprentice with a borrowed secret, possibly hope to mend a fracture that spanned the entire realm? Shivering, she pulled the crystallized starlight from her pocket. Its gentle pulse was a familiar comfort. Holding it up, she turned her gaze to the frog rune, not to find a flaw, but to understand its perfection. Through the shard's lens, the rune was a masterpiece of balanced energy. Its luminous lines wove together in a harmonious, self-sustaining pattern, a quiet symphony of stability. Where the fractured moon rune had been a frantic, brilliant star, this was a deep, still pool. She studied it, committing the elegant flow of its structure to memory, not as a series of glyphs, but as a feeling of profound peace. This, she understood, was the template. This was the essence of what the anchor rune needed to be, a foundation of unshakable calm. The realization was both empowering and humbling. She had the key to the problem, a schematic for a solution, but the task of forging such a rune felt impossibly vast. It required more knowledge, more strength, more stability than she possessed. The high emotional stakes of her journey crystallized into a simple, undeniable truth. She could not do this alone. As the first hints of dawn began to soften the bog's lingering shadows, painting the mist in pale, hopeful light, a familiar, gruff voice cut through the silence, calling her name from a distance. His voice was a cold anchor in the bog's heavy silence. Lyra. She turned to see Kalin standing at the edge of the solid ground, his face a stark blend of profound worry and the stern disappointment she had dreaded most. He did not step into the frog rune sanctuary, as if her choices had already built a wall between them. He had felt the magical disturbances, he said, a ripple of dream energy and the tremor of the Warden's pursuit, and he had tracked the chaotic trail straight to her. The full weight of all her secret keeping crashed down upon her then, heavier than any stone giant. His fear was not for the rules she had broken, but for the uncertainty she had invited, an uncertainty that now knew where to find them both. "You believe you are healing," he said, his voice low and strained, "but you are pulling at threads without seeing the whole tapestry. You risk unraveling everything." The conflict between them was laid bare, no longer a quiet tension, but a chasm of opposing beliefs. With tears finally spilling over, her composure shattered by exhaustion, and his clear, sharp fear, Lyra made the most difficult choice of her life. She opened her clenched fist, revealing the crystallized Starlight shard, and she began to speak. The words tumbled out in a raw, unpolished flood, the story of the dream singer's gift, the hidden archive of echoes, the persistent Warden, and the vast, quiet crisis of the great forgetting. She held nothing back, her voice trembling with the immensity of the truth she had carried alone. She watched his face as she spoke, waiting for the final, irrevocable break, for the frustration that would sever their partnership forever. But a quiet shift occurred. His stern expression did not harden further. It seemed to dissolve, the frustration melting away into a weary, profound sadness that etched new lines around his eyes. He listened until the very last word fell into the quiet bog air. He looked from her tear-streaked face to the shimmering shard in her hand, and then his gaze swept over the protective frog rune, a symbol of the stability he had always championed. He took a slow, deep breath, and his next words were not what she expected at all. "Then we have no time to waste." The workshop felt different that night, filled not with a heavy silence, but with the quiet urgency of shared purpose. Kalin did not light a lamp, instead allowing the soft glow of the rising moon to filter through the window as he cleared a space on his cluttered workbench. He did not look at her as he began to speak, his voice low and steady, as if recounting a story from another lifetime. "I was not always a forger of root and stone, Lyra. Once I chased the very same shimmering threads you do." He spoke of a time when he was young and bold, convinced that the old ways of caution were chains to be broken. He had discovered a nexus rune, a point where many magical currents met, and saw a fracture he believed he alone could mend. His attempt was not born of arrogance, but of a fervent hope to strengthen the entire region. But his hand slipped, his will faltered, and the magic did not break. It simply turned inward. There was no explosion, no cataclysm of sound and light. There was only a great, quiet sigh, and then a profound and permanent silence. The nearby village of Aloria, a place of laughter and light, did not vanish in a flash. It was gently, irrevocably erased, not from the land, but from memory, from history, from existence itself. The forgetting he had caused was so complete that even the paths that led to its meadows faded from the minds of those who had walked them every day. Lyra listened, her own breath caught in her throat, as the true source of his caution was laid bare. He was not a man who feared magic, but a man who had seen its most gentle and terrible face, a power that could unmake the world, not with a roar, but with a whisper. Her understanding of him shifted profoundly in that moment. He was no longer a restrictive master, but a tragic, cautionary figure, a living reminder of the cost of a single, well-intentioned misstep. The tension between them dissolved, replaced by the grim weight of a shared reality. The threat was real, and it was vast. Their conflict was no longer about methods, but about time. "We cannot stop what has begun," Kalin said, his gaze finally meeting hers, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "The great forgetting is a tide. We cannot hold it back with our hands, but we can build an anchor." "I will not stop you, Lyra. I will stand with you." His decision to guide her, to combine his hard-won experience with her unique connection to the dream magic, transformed their partnership. The stakes were now intimately shared. Failure meant not just a world fading into ordinary silence, but a personal tragedy of unimaginable scale, a repeat of his past mistake that would eclipse it completely. Yet success offered a chance not only to save their world, but to redeem a loss that had haunted him for decades. Without another word, they began their work. The air in the workshop hummed with a new, focused energy. Kalin pulled ancient, half-forgotten texts from a locked chest, while Lyra laid the precious schematic for the anchor rune beside her crystallized shard. Together, under the moon's soft light, they began gathering the rare materials the ritual would demand, their movements synchronized in a silent, determined dance against the coming dawn. The cedar workbench became an altar under the moonlight, its surface cleared for an act of creation that felt both sacred and deeply challenging. Lyra's hands trembled as she positioned the first piece of luminous river quartz, the core of the anchor rune, while Kalin began tracing a circle of grounding symbols around them with a piece of dark, resonant slate. Their approaches, once so opposed, now wove together in a delicate dance. Lyra focused through the crystallized shard, channeling the silvery, dreamlike energy that yearned to flow free, while Kalin's steady hands followed, tempering that wild light with the sturdy, patient language of earth and stone. The magic itself was the adversary, a living, resistant force that pushed back against the patterns they were trying to establish. It felt like trying to guide a bolt of lightning with a thread of silk, a demanding test of will that required absolute trust between them. A single lapse in concentration from either could send the cascading energy spinning into a dangerous release, revealing their sanctuary and everything they held dear. In a moment of crystalline understanding, Lyra realized that pure power was not enough. The anchor needed a reason to hold. Closing her eyes, she pushed past the raw energy and instead infused the forming rune with the very essence of safety she had always felt within these four walls. She gave it the memory of the workshop's cedar, scented warmth, the soft scratch of Kalin's quill, the gentle hum of peacefully slumbering tools. She gave it a heart. The effect was immediate and profound. The flickering, chaotic light softened, then stabilized, settling into a deep, warm, golden glow that pulsed with a rhythm like a steady heartbeat. As the first ray of dawn touched the window, the completed anchor rune rested on the bench, no longer a mere object, but a living promise. A profound, unshakable peace filled the room, a sense of solidity so deep, it felt as if the workshop had grown roots reaching down to the center of the world. They had done it. They had not just built a tool, but forged a new beginning from the fragments of their earlier struggles. Yet that profound peace was also a beacon, a signal of their success, shining into a world that was still quietly fraying at the edges. The deep golden piece of the anchor rune shattered with a tremor that shook dust from the rafters. The morning light at the window vanished, blocked by a monolithic form of granite and moss. The Warden had found them. It stood before their cottage, a sentinel of ancient law, and the ground groaned under its weight. The direct challenge they had fled was now at their door, an implacable force demanding an answer for the powerful magic they had unleashed. There was nowhere left to run. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the rune's steady pulse in her hands. This was the moment every secret had led to, the ultimate confrontation between their fragile, newfound hope and the unbending will of a guardian. Kalin moved a step in front of her, his own protective instincts flaring, but Lyra gently shifted away. Her decision was clear and quiet. She would not hide behind her master, not this time. Cradling the warm, living stone of the anchor rune, she walked out to meet the giant, her steps firm on the trembling earth. She did not raise it as a weapon or a shield, but held it before her like an offering, a tangible explanation for the disturbance they had caused. The Warden loomed over her, its obsidian eyes impossible to read, the silence stretching into a terrifying void. Lyra began to speak, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We did not break your laws. We forged a new promise. This is not a theft, but an anchor for a world that is quietly fading. Can you not feel the great forgetting?" Her words hung in the air, a desperate plea aimed at a heart of stone. The stakes were absolute. A final, all-or-nothing appeal to prove their intent was not to plunder, but to preserve everything, including the very echoes the Warden was sworn to protect. The Warden's stony silence felt heavier than any threat. Lyra did not flinch. Closing her eyes, she pressed the crystallized starlight against the warm anchor rune and focused every bit of her will, not on defiance, but on invitation. She did not project an argument or a plea for mercy. Instead, she sent the pure, simple memory she had woven into the rune's very core, the scent of cedar dust and safety, the quiet rhythm of shared work, the profound desire not to disrupt, but to heal a world she loved. The memory flowed through the shard like a silver current, a wave of silent understanding aimed directly at the giant's obsidian heart. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing changed. Then, the grinding of stone ceased. The rigid lines of the Warden's monolithic form seemed to soften at the edges, its immense head tilting as if listening to a distant, forgotten song. It was reading the truth of their purpose, feeling the weight of their intent in a way words could never convey. Seeing the shift, Kalin stepped forward to stand beside her, his presence a solid, grounding warmth. He did not speak aloud, but added his own signature to the projection, a memory of his own, long held within. He offered the echo of Aloria's quiet, the heavy weight of his youthful misstep, and the fragile, decades-old hope for a second chance. Their two pleas, one of innocence and one of renewal, wove together into a single, unified testament. The tension in the clearing shifted from a battle of power to a profound, silent communication, a question asked not with force, but with shared vulnerability. They were not demanding passage. They were asking for partnership from a being designed to know only solitude, seeking understanding from a guardian of absolute law. The Warden's massive hand, which could have shattered their cottage with a single blow, slowly uncurled. It reached out, not with violence, but with a deliberate, almost reverent slowness. Its granite fingers, rough and ancient, gently touched the surface of the glowing anchor rune, At the moment of contact, a soft light bloomed across its stony skin, and the intricate patterns of the archive's runes glowed in perfect, silent sync upon its surface, as if the cave itself were speaking through the guardian, acknowledging their purpose at last. The Warden's touch was a silent vow. Without a word, it turned and began to move through the forest, its heavy steps now carving a path of purpose, not pursuit. Lyra and Kalin followed, the warm weight of the anchor rune a shared heartbeat between them. They were led to a place not on any map, a hidden clearing where the air itself shimmered with a palpable pressure. Here, three invisible rivers of power, the world's ley lines, met in a swirling, silent vortex. This was the Confluence, the only crucible strong enough to ignite their anchor for the entire realm. The chance for success was real, but the cost of falling short was now deeply personal. The raw, untamed energy of the place threatened to sweep their very thoughts away, scattering their awareness into the endless dream stream like leaves in a storm. Lyra knew what had to be done. Her connection to the dream magic, amplified by the crystallized shard, made her the only one who could guide this torrent. She would have to stand at the very center to become the conduit. She met Kalin's gaze, a silent request for his trust, and he gave a slow, steady nod. He and the Warden would be her anchors to reality, their combined strength a tether to keep her from drifting beyond reach. To falter was to become a permanent part of the fading magic, a whisper in the ambient dream they were trying to preserve. As Lyra stepped into the heart of the swirling light, she placed the anchor rune on the ground and pressed the Starlight shard to her chest. Kalin began a low, grounding chant, his hands resting on her shoulders, while the Warden placed its massive stone hands upon the earth, stabilizing the very ground beneath them. The moment the ritual began, the solid world dissolved. The clearing vanished into a roaring vortex of pure potential, a river of light and sound and forgotten memory that threatened to pull her consciousness into its flow. The vortex was not a storm to be weathered, but a language to be learned. Lyra did not brace against its currents. She let them flow through her, the anchor rune in her hands glowing brighter with every passing second. It became her compass, its steady pulse, guiding her perception through the beautiful, terrifying chaos. She saw them then, not as breaks, but as silvery traces in the fabric of everything, thin places where the great forgetting was patiently pulling the magic of the world apart. Her task was not to force or command, but to weave, drawing on the cozy, gentle dream magic she had first felt in the glade. She began to spin threads of luminous, comforting energy, patiently stitching the frayed edges of each opening back together. With every delicate repair, a small, quiet chime resonated through the vortex, and the oppressive, hollow feeling began to subtly recede, replaced by a gentle, pervasive warmth that felt like the first sip of tea on a cold morning. Yet the work was a constant battle against her own mind. The endless dream was seductive, offering a release from the immense strain of focus. It whispered promises of simply letting go, of dissolving into the beautiful, weightless light, and becoming one with the endless, peaceful hum. Mental fatigue was a heavy cloak, threatening to pull her under, to make surrender seem not like failure, but like a welcome rest. At her most vulnerable moment, when the pull felt irresistible, her mind grasped for an anchor in the real world. She focused not on a grand ideal, but on the simple, tangible memory of Kalin's hand on her shoulder, the solid, grounding pressure of his trust. That single, physical sensation was a lifeline, pulling her consciousness back from the edge and centering her once more on the vital task at hand. The fate of every whispering glade, every dream wisp, every lingering echo of magic now rested entirely on the resilience of her will. She could feel the entire network trembling, a delicate mobile waiting for its central counterweight. Summoning a final, immense effort that drained the last of her strength, she guided the anchor rune to the very heart of the swirling confluence. This was not an act of placing an object, but of slotting a key into a lock that had been lost for ages. The moment it settled into place, a wave of solid, peaceful energy radiated outward in a silent, expanding ring of golden light. It did not crash or roar, but washed through the realm like a slow, deep breath, bringing with it a quiet so profound it felt like the universe itself was finally at rest. A deep, resonant peace settled over the realm, a quiet so profound it felt like the first true silence after a long and terrible storm. The golden wave from the anchor rune did not crash. It seeped into the world, a gentle tide of remembrance. It flowed into the cracked fox rune on the forgotten shrine, its jagged line sealing with a final, loving touch. It washed over the fractured moon rune in the whispering glade, and its light, once volatile, now pulsed with a steady, dreamlike rhythm. Every stream ran a little clearer, every stone felt a little more solid, and the very air seemed to hum with a quiet, vibrant energy that was both more real and more magical than before. The great forgetting was over, replaced by a great remembering, a feeling that the world had been holding its breath and could finally, fully exhale. For Lyra, Kalin, and the Warden, the success was not an idea, but a physical sensation, a warmth that bloomed in their chests, and a lightness that replaced the immense weight they had carried. The tension that had defined their every action for so long simply dissolved, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a quiet, swelling joy. Lyra, still standing at the heart of the confluence, felt the last of her conscious control slip away. There was no more need to guide or force the magic. It flowed now on its own, a self-sustaining river of light and peace, and she was simply a part of its beautiful, natural current, no longer its conduit, but its witness. The cosmic stakes that had hung over them, the possibility of a world fading into silent ordinary, evaporated like a morning mist. The realm was not just saved, it was renewed, its essential magic woven into a stronger, more resilient fabric, a legacy secured for all the generations to come. The golden light of the ritual slowly faded, its work complete, leaving the three of them standing together in the tranquil clearing. The air was cool and clean, filled with the rich, comforting scent of rain-washed earth and the sweet perfume of night flowers that had begun to bloom in the newfound peace. A soft, crystalline chime resonated through the clearing, a sound that seemed to originate from the very air around them. The light of the newly anchored realm coalesced, drawing together into a familiar, luminous form. The dream singer stood before them, but it was transformed. Where its shape had once been woven from shifting starlight and suggestion, it now held a gentle solidity, its presence radiating a deep, quiet warmth like the embers of a comforting fire. It was no longer a creature of fleeting dreams, but a being of sustained and peaceful imagination. With a grace that spoke of ages, it bowed first to Lyra, then to Kalin, and finally to the stoic Warden. This was not a simple nod of thanks, but a profound, sweeping gesture of gratitude from the heart of the realm's own magic. In that bow lay the acknowledgement of their shared journey, their hard-won trust, and the future they had secured for every whispering glade and every resting spirit. A new understanding settled over the three of them, not as a spoken title, but as a truth woven directly into their spirits. They were no longer merely a master and apprentice, or a guardian of stone. They were the Rune-Forgers, the appointed guardians of the delicate balance between the dreaming and the waking world, their legacy forever etched into the story of the realm. Lyra felt the weight of the title, but it was not a heavy burden. It was a purpose that fit her perfectly, a responsibility that felt like coming home. She looked to Kalin, whose stern face was softened by a quiet pride, and then to the Warden, whose stony stillness now felt like steadfast companionship. She stepped forward, her voice clear and steady, and made a promise not just to the dream singer, but to the world itself. "We will watch over the runes," she vowed. With wisdom and with care, this was the fulfillment of her journey, not the defiant independence she had once craved, but a role built on partnership and a deep, abiding love for the magic she had helped to save. The dream singer's luminous form began to gently fade, its purpose complete. As it dissolved back into the soft light of the glade, it left behind a single, perfect flower where its heart had been. A moon lily, with petals that shimmered with captured starlight, bloomed eternally from the moss at their feet, a living token of the covenant they now shared. The cottage walls hummed a quiet, contented tune as they crossed the threshold. Every stone in the hearth, every plank of the floor, seemed to resonate with the deep, golden peace they had woven into the world. Lyra's workbench, once just a scarred slab of wood, now gleamed with a soft, inner light, and Kalin's chisels rested in their tray, as if dreaming of the perfect forms they would next help to shape. This was no longer just a workshop, but a living sanctuary, a tiny, steadfast beacon of the stability they had fought so hard to create. The silence that filled the room was not the tense void of before, but a deep and well-earned respite, a blanket of quiet comfort after the storm. Without a word, they began to move through the space with a new, shared purpose. Kalin cleared a shelf that had long held only the dust of old, rigid theories, while Lyra carefully arranged her crystallized Starlight shard beside his most reliable slate pencils. They were not just tidying, they were building a new foundation within these four walls, a physical space that honored both the sturdy, time-tested methods of earth forging and the intuitive, dreamlike techniques she had unlocked. The stakes had shifted entirely, from preventing an end to building a beginning, from preserving a legacy to defining a new one for all the Rune-Forgers who might one day follow. As Lyra carefully placed a vibrant moon lily in a small vase on the central windowsill, a soft, tentative knock echoed from the cottage door. The soft knock was a fragile sound against the sturdy oak door. Lyra opened it to find a small boy shifting nervously from foot to foot, his hands cupped carefully around a small, carved stone. The badger rune was cracked clean through, and the boy's eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. He had heard the whispers, he stammered, about the people who lived in the woods, the ones who had mended the very sky. In that moment, the profound peace of their sanctuary met the raw, immediate need of the world outside. They were no longer just Lyra and Kalin, reclusive masters of a quiet craft. They had become the Rune-Forgers, and the world, it seemed, had already begun to find its way to their doorstep. The weight of that new identity settled upon them, not as a burden, but as a quiet, undeniable truth. The hope shining in the boy's eyes was a responsibility far more intimate than confronting a stone giant. It was a plea for the small, essential magic that kept his family's farm safe and whole. Lyra glanced at Kalin, seeking guidance in this new, uncharted territory of being sought after. His response was a slow, deliberate nod, his own stern features softened by a look of quiet approval. This was the work, his expression said. This was what came next. With a warm smile, Lyra knelt down to the boy's level and invited him inside. The cottage, still humming with its deep, anchored peace, seemed to welcome the young visitor, the air itself feeling gentler as he stepped across the threshold. She did not simply take the broken talisman from his trembling hands. Instead, she guided him to her workbench, now glowing with a soft light, and began to show him. She explained how the badger rune was not just a carving, but a promise of protection and resilience, its spirit one of quiet strength and determination. She let him feel the cool, smooth surface of the stone away from the fracture, and then the rough, jagged edge of the break, describing how a rune's energy could fade from such a wound, leaving the badgers on his farm feeling lost and unsure. As she spoke, she mixed a simple paste of crushed oak gall and dew gathered at dawn, her movements slow and deliberate so he could follow. She showed him how to apply the mixture not as a glue, but as a bridge, a gentle invitation for the stone's own memory to heal itself. Her teaching was a kind of magic in itself, a patient transfer of understanding that transformed a desperate plea into a shared lesson. The boy watched, utterly captivated, his fear forgotten in the wonder of the process. When the final, hair-thin seam of the rune sealed with a soft, amber glow, his face lit up with a joy so pure it seemed to brighten the entire room. In that moment, the cosmic stakes of their earlier journey evolved into something new, something deeply human. The task was no longer about preventing an end, but about nurturing a beginning. It was about tending to the countless small magics that made life in their realm gentle and good, one kind act, one mended rune, one taught lesson at a time. Watching the boy hold his restored talisman with reverent hands, Lyra felt a profound fulfillment settle in her heart, a deep knowing that their most important work was just beginning. Finn's presence became as constant as the dawn. He arrived each morning with a pocket full of interesting stones and an endless stream of questions, his innate talent for sensing the subtle hum of runic energy undeniable. Within a week, Lyra and Kalin shared a quiet conversation over the evening tea, and a joint decision was made. They formally invited Finn to become their first shared apprentice, a role that filled the small cottage with a new, vibrant energy. His laughter now mingled with the scratch of slate pencils and the scent of cedar, a living promise that their hard-won knowledge would not end with them. Lyra quickly discovered a new kind of challenge, however. One moment, she was a student, carefully listening to Kalin's explanation of foundational glyphs, and the next she was a mentor, fumbling to find the right words to explain the same concept to an eager young boy. She sometimes caught herself asking Kalin for permission to fetch a tool, only to realize Finn was looking to her for the same approval, a gentle comedy of shifting roles that made them all smile. In her teaching, Lyra made a conscious choice. She would not simply repeat Kalin's rigorous, structured lessons, nor would she teach only her own intuitive, dream-touched methods. Instead, she wove them together, showing Finn how to first understand a rune's sturdy, physical structure before encouraging him to close his eyes and feel its unique song. She was building a new way of learning, one that honored both the root and the branch of their craft. The stakes felt higher than any confrontation with a warden, for they were now actively shaping the heart and mind of the future. One evening, as the last light faded and the fire crackled in the hearth, Finn looked up from mending a practice glyph, his young face serious. "Can you tell me the story?" he asked softly. "The story of how you mended the great forgetting." Lyra settled onto the floor beside him, the warm glow of the moon lily catching her eye. She smiled, and her voice was gentle as she began. It started with a fractured moon rune. The request settled deep into her heart, a quiet calling she had not expected. That night, Lyra took out a fresh sheaf of parchment and a new bottle of ink, but not to transcribe old theories. She began to write their story. She did not list events or record dates, but instead wove the cozy magic of the workshop, the haunting hum of the dream singer, and the steadfast silence of the warden into a narrative that felt like a warm blanket for the soul. She wrote of the uncertainty and the hope, the breaking and the healing, capturing the very dreamlike ambience of their journey. This was not history. It was a legend in the making, a tale meant to be told by firelight to kindle wonder in the listener. With every word she wrote, their personal experiences transformed into something larger, a shared mythology for their realm. The only true challenge was finding language beautiful enough to hold the soft weight of crystallized starlight, or the profound peace of the anchored world. Kalin, seeing her struggle to capture the visual essence of the spirits and runes, did not offer critique. He quietly took up his own charcoal and began to sketch. His illustrations flowed onto the margins of her pages, intricate drawings that captured the luminous form of the dream singer and the gentle, knowing eyes of the fox spirit. His art gave a silent, sturdy form to the dreamlike magic of her words, their two crafts merging into a single, beautiful chronicle. Together, they were building the foundational stories for future generations, ensuring that the knowledge of balance and the beauty of their craft would never again be forgotten. The cultural stakes felt just as immense as their earlier cosmic effort, for they were now shaping the very heart of their world's identity. As Lyra wrote the final, gentle words of the first tale, a soft chime resonated from the wind rune outside her window, and a dream-laden breeze stirred the pages, as if the realm itself was sighing in approval. The warden's shadow fell across the garden like a gentle mountain, no longer a threat, but a familiar, if immense, presence. It moved with a new, deliberate care through the herbs and moon lilies, its stone feet barely disturbing the soil, and placed a single, perfectly smooth river stone upon their workbench. The stone was dark and deep, holding a quiet light within it, like a captured pool of still water, and it hummed with a soft, resonant frequency they could feel in their bones. This was a story stone, Kalin explained, his voice hushed with a kind of reverence, a rare artifact from the heart of the archive of echoes. It did not need to be carved or commanded. It simply listened, absorbing the emotional essence of the place it rested in, the whispered joys and quiet struggles, preserving them not as dry history, but as living memory. The sheer responsibility of such a gift was immense, a silent charge to curate the very spirit of their age. Where should such a powerful chronicle belong? Lyra wondered, a place of honor inside their sacred workshop, or somewhere more open, more alive. Her decision felt right the moment she spoke it. They would place it in the very center of their garden, where it could drink in the sun-warmed scent of time and the soft conversations between the trees, where it could remember the peaceful, creative energy of their home as its truest story. As they settled the stone into a bed of soft moss between the foxgloves and the sage, a profound understanding passed between them all. Their small sanctuary was now intrinsically linked to the realm's oldest memories, their legacy guaranteed not just by their own hands, but witnessed and recorded by the world itself. That night, under a sky dusted with stars, the stone began its work. A soft, buttery light pulsed from its core, and if you listened very closely, you could just hear the faint, crystalline echo of Finn's laughter from that afternoon, a happy memory already woven into its enduring heart. The lanterns appeared first in the village square, a constellation of soft, paper globes painted with badgers and moons and twisting river currents. They were not hung by any official decree, but placed there by hands that remembered the feeling of lost warmth returning. A baker whose ovens now held a steady, gentle heat brought loaves shaped like growth runes. A woodcarver's daughter presented Lyra with a small, beautifully carved frog, its surface polished smooth by hopeful fingers. This was the Festival of Lights, a spontaneous thank you woven from gratitude and shared relief. Lyra stood at the edge of the celebration, the vibrant noise and laughter feeling like a wave she was not sure how to navigate. She had grown so accustomed to the quiet rhythm of the workshop and the profound silences of the glade that this human warmth was almost overwhelming. She watched Kalin across the square, accepting a cup of spiced cider from the elder with a quiet, dignified nod. His usual sternness softened into something resembling peace. He seemed to fit into this scene in a way she could not yet grasp. A flush of shy discomfort warmed her cheeks as a group of children pointed and whispered, their eyes wide with open admiration. She was used to being unseen, her work a secret between the trees, and this public recognition felt like standing in a bright, unfamiliar light. The temptation to retreat into the familiar shadows at the edge of the forest was a strong, physical pull. But then the music started, a lively tune from a fiddle and a flute, and the villagers began to form a wide, joyful circle around the central bonfire. Their faces, lit by the flickering flames, were not looking at a distant hero, but at a friend they hoped would join them. Lyra took a deep breath, the scent of wood smoke and honey cakes filling her lungs, and made her choice. She stepped forward, letting her hand be taken by the woodcarver's smiling wife, and was swept into the dance. The initial awkwardness melted away with the first few steps, replaced by a rhythm that felt as natural as the hum of a well-made rune. The joy of the community was not an abstract idea anymore. It was a tangible, warm magic flowing from hand to hand, a current of connection that felt every bit as real as the energy she had woven into the anchor. She was not an outsider looking in, but a thread being pulled gently into a beautiful, living tapestry. Across the fire, Kalin watched the light dance in her eyes, the last vestiges of his own long-held guilt finally melting away in the shared warmth of the night. The silent, empty space where Aloria had once been in his heart did not vanish, but it was no longer a cold, lonely wound. It was now a quiet memorial, its memory honored by the vibrant, laughing community thriving right before him, a community that now included them both. The music and laughter seemed to soften around them as an elderly woman with hands like woven thread approached. She was Lyra, a tapestry weaver whose family had spun stories into cloth for generations. Her most precious loom, its frame inscribed with ancient creativity runes, had fallen utterly silent. She described the quiet not as a simple malfunction, but as a deep, personal transition, a fading of the very inspiration that had guided her hands since she was a girl. She feared the magic of her craft was not just sleeping, but truly drifting away. This quiet plea was their first true summons as the recognized Rune-Forgers, a task that felt small in scale, but immense in its human weight. The challenge was not one of force, but of understanding. When they examined the loom in her small, yarn-filled studio, the runes themselves were physically perfect, their carvings sharp and unbroken. Yet through Alara's crystallized shard, they appeared as dull, gray shapes, their connection to the vibrant dream magic of creation completely dormant, like a songbird that had forgotten its own tune. Kalin's experienced eye traced the flow of energy around the loom's frame. He noted a subtle misalignment in the foundational support, a tiny shift that had occurred over years of use, almost impossible to see with the naked eye. This minute physical drift had acted like a closed valve, slowly starving the runes of the imaginative current they needed to thrive. Their solution was a perfect fusion of their two paths. Lyra used the shard to pinpoint the exact point of the magical blockage, a faint, shadowy knot in the energy field, while Kalin prepared a traditional realignment tool, a simple brass hammer, and a wedge of resonant wood. With painstaking precision, he gave the frame a single, gentle tap, a correction so slight it made no audible sound, but the effect was immediate and beautiful. The dormant runes flared to life, not with a flash, but with a soft, warm glow, and the air in the room suddenly hummed with a palpable sense of potential, as if 1,000 new stories had just whispered themselves awake. The stakes here were not about saving the world, but about restoring a single person's joy and creative purpose. It was a powerful reminder that their duty involved both the cosmic and the deeply intimate, that the magic of a single heart was as vital as the stability of the ley line. As Lyra placed her hands back upon the loom, her grateful tears seemed to sparkle with the same gentle light, now emanating from the wood. Without a moment of hesitation, she selected a spool of silver thread and began to weave, her shuttle flying with a newfound speed and certainty. Taking shape upon the cloth were 3 distinct figures, their forms emerging from the warp and weft, a new tapestry depicting the 3 Rune-Forgers at their moment of unity. The door opened to a quiet rustle of cloth and the scent of dried lavender. Lyra stood there, her arms wrapped carefully around a large, carefully rolled bundle. Weeks had passed since her loom had been restored, and her eyes now shone with a calm, steady light. With a gentle reverence, she unrolled her gift across their workbench, the heavy fabric settling with a soft whisper. It was the tapestry, and it was more than a weaving. It was a window into a memory made of thread. The central scene was a cozy depiction of their workshop, every detail lovingly rendered. There was Lyra, her hair a cascade of silver thread, leaning over a rune that glowed with soft amber light. Kalin stood beside her, his usually stern face softened into an expression of quiet guidance, one hand resting on Finn's small shoulder as the boy looked up with wide, eager eyes. But the true magic was in the borders, woven into the edges of the fabric, watching over the domestic scene with a benevolent presence, were the dream singer, a form of shimmering opalescent thread, and the Warden, his stony body suggested by thick, textured wool. They were not intruders, but guardians, part of the family they had all become. A profound silence filled the room, thick with a shared, overwhelming emotion. Lyra felt her breath catch, her eyes stinging as she looked at the woven version of their lives. It was one thing to live a story, and another entirely to see it reflected back with such beauty and care. The chaotic moments, the long journey, the deep weariness, all of it was translated into a scene of profound peace and connection. Kalin, usually so reserved, reached out a calloused finger and gently traced the woven line of his own shoulder, his throat working silently. In that moment, the weight of their entire journey settled upon them not as a burden, but as a cherished memory, a meaningful path that had led them exactly here, to this quiet room and this found family. The decision of where to place it required no discussion. It belonged in the heart of their home, the main room of the cottage, where its gentle presence could be a part of their daily rhythm. They hung it on the wall opposite the fireplace, where the flickering light would make the shimmering threads seem to breathe. The tapestry became more than a decoration. It was a visual anchor for their shared legacy. Its presence in the main room meant that every morning began with a reminder of their purpose, and every evening ended with the silent company of their story. It cemented their legend not as a distant tale, but as a living, breathing truth woven into the very walls that sheltered them. The nature of their existence subtly shifted from active protection to gentle stewardship, their past experiences now a permanent source of strength for the challenges yet to come. Finn, in particular, was drawn to it. In the quiet hours of the afternoon, he would often sit on the floor before the hanging cloth, his small finger carefully tracing the intricate runes woven into the tapestry's border. His lips would move silently, practicing the names and shapes of the symbols, learning the language of his new world from a story made of wool and love. The weight in her pocket felt different now, not a vibrant hum, but a quiet, cooling presence. One evening, as she prepared a new batch of ink, Lyra realized the crystallized Starlight shard had gone silent. Its inner light, once a shifting nebula, was now a steady, faint glow, like a single ember after a great fire has burned down. The tool that had guided her, challenged her, and nearly claimed her, had simply finished its work. The understanding settled over her not as a loss, but as a quiet fact. It was time to let it go. She carried it back to the whispering glade at twilight, the place where her journey had truly begun. Kneeling before the mended moon rune, its light now a steady, gentle pulse, she pressed the shard into the soft, dark earth. It was not a return to the earth, but a homecoming. The moment the shard sank from sight, the ground responded. A patch of moss erupted where her hand had been, but this was no ordinary green. It was a carpet of deepest blue, sprinkled with pinpricks of silver light that glowed with their own soft, internal luminescence, a miniature galaxy blooming at her feet. This new star moss radiated a gentle, soothing energy, a minor but permanent place of power that would nurture the glade for ages to come. A bittersweet ache filled her chest as she watched the light spread. This small, beautiful object had been her secret, her teacher, and her greatest risk. Letting it go felt like closing a cherished and turbulent chapter of her life. Yet, as she looked at her empty hand, she felt no emptiness. Instead, she felt a new, solid strength within herself, a confidence that needed no lens to see the magic in the world. She could feel the flow of energy around her, understand the language of the runes, and trust her own intuition without its aid. This was her full maturation, the moment she stepped from being an apprentice who relied on a powerful crutch to a master whose power was now wholly and authentically her own. As she stood to leave the glade, a soft, melodic hum rose from the star moss, the same crystalline song of the dream singer. It was not a farewell, but a lullaby, a piece of that first magical encounter, now woven permanently into the earth, a perpetual resonance of peace for the glade, and a gentle reminder that some endings are simply beautiful beginnings in disguise. The stream's gentle murmur seemed a little quieter than it should. Lyra knelt on the bank, letting Finn peer at the faded water rune carved into a time-smoothed stone at the water's edge. Its lines, meant to guide the current's clean flow, were worn almost to invisibility. This was his task. She watched his small hands, so serious with the charcoal stick, as he traced the forgotten pattern onto a scrap of parchment, his brow furrowed in concentration, just as hers once had. Her role now felt strangely balanced, a delicate dance between the instinct to guide his every move and the necessary trust to let his own intuition bloom. She offered quiet suggestions, echoing Kalin's old lessons about the intention behind each curve, but she also left space for him to feel the rune's quiet plea for himself, to discover its unique voice in the flow of the water. When he mixed the mending paste, his measurement of ground willow bark was a little too generous, making the mixture too thick. Her own hand twitched with the urge to correct him, to ensure a perfect repair on his first try. But she held back, let him see the consequence, she thought. Let him learn that not all errors are catastrophes. He applied the paste, and the too thick bridge refused to settle, crumbling away from the stone. His face fell, a wave of frustration darkening his bright eyes. Lyra did not scold. She simply knelt beside him, her presence a steady anchor. "See how it pulls away," she said softly. "The willow wishes to be a gentle guide, not a stern wall. Let's try it with a lighter touch." Together, they cleared the old paste away and ground a new batch, her hand over his to show him the right consistency. This time, the paste flowed smoothly into the carved lines, sealing them with a soft, blue shimmer. The stream's murmur seemed to deepen instantly, the water running clearer and with a more joyful sound over the stones. The triumph in Finn's eyes was not just about success, but about the journey through a small failure to a hard-won solution. He had not simply mended a rune, he had mended his own resolve. As they walked home through the dappled afternoon light, Finn chattered excitedly about a bird rune he had seen high in an oak tree, his words tumbling out in an eager stream. His enthusiasm was a perfect echo of a younger self she remembered so well, a reflection of her own first steps on this path. The cycle was unbroken. The traditions they lived were no longer just their own story, but a seed carefully planted in new soil, ensuring its magic would ripple far into the future, one small, mended rune at a time. The sky above the valley began to shift, the deep blue of twilight deepening into a profound, star-flecked violet. A rare celestial alignment was beginning, a convergence of three wandering stars that pulled at the very threads of magic in the air. This gentle pressure, beautiful from a distance, placed a silent, immense strain upon the runic network they had worked so hard to stabilize. It was a final test, a quiet demand for the realm to prove its newfound resilience. The plan was simple, yet it required absolute precision. Lyra would take the most volatile point at the northern crag, where the dream currents ran wild and thin. Kalin would anchor the eastern woods, a place of deep, ancient roots, and Finn, with a courage that belied his youth, would hold the southern spring, a source of pure, life-giving water. They had to activate their respective anchor points in perfect unison, a triad of light to brace the world against the alignment's pull. As Lyra climbed the windswept crag, the air itself felt electric and thin, like a soap bubble moments from popping. She could feel the other 2 points in her mind, faint but steady presences. Kalin's a deep, patient hum, and Finn's a bright, determined spark. Her own position was a maelstrom of potential, the silvery dream magic she had always been drawn to now whipping around her in frantic, luminous tendrils. To channel this, she would need more than skill. She would need to become a conduit for everything she had learned and everyone she had come to hold dear. The moment arrived. A beam of concentrated starlight, cold and clear, lanced down from the heavens and struck her rune. The impact was a silent, physical blow. The wild energy surged into her, and for a terrifying second, she was utterly alone, isolated on a peak of howling light, with the stability of everything hanging on her next breath. Her instinct was to grasp for control, to force the magic into submission with her own will. But in that crystallizing moment of pressure, a deeper truth surfaced. Her strength was not a solitary thing. It was woven from Kalin's hard-won patience, from Finn's unwavering belief, from the Warden's steadfast silence, and from the quiet gratitude in a weaver's eyes. She let go. Instead of fighting the current, she opened herself to it, trusting that the bonds she had forged would hold her fast. She channeled the alignment's power, not as a master commanding a force, but as a friend welcoming a guest, guiding it with a gentle, open hand. Across the valley, she felt more than saw the other 2 points flare to life, their lights answering her own in a perfect, resonant chord. Her rune blazed not with volatile brilliance, but with a deep, golden radiance that wove itself into the very fabric of the night. The strain vanished, replaced by a permanent, unshakable peace that settled over the realm like a gentle, final sigh. The stars above held their new configuration, no longer a threat, but a beautiful, fixed part of a cosmos that was finally, completely at home. The realm's daily rhythms now hummed with the quiet magic Lyra and Kalin had restored. Parents told their children cozy tales of the dream singer, not as distant myths, but as gentle history, its melody woven into lullabies sung by firelight. The glowing runes carved into bridges and hearths were no longer just functional symbols. They were reminders of a shared story, a living history that pulsed with the land's own contented heartbeat. Lyra herself moved through this world with a new grace, the secretive apprentice having fully evolved into a patient, intuitive master. Her partnership with Kalin was a seamless dance of intuition and experience, their once opposing paths now braided into a single, stronger cord that guided all they did. Their workshop had become a true center of the community, a place where laughter mixed with the scent of cedar and ozone, and where anyone, from a curious child to a seasoned craftsperson, could find a listening ear and a shared search for understanding. The dreamlike ambience that once felt so fragile was now a deep and resilient presence, a golden thread stitched permanently into the fabric of reality, able to withstand the gentle pull of the stars and the passing of seasons without fraying. One evening, Lyra stood at the garden's edge, looking out over the peaceful, starlit valley. The soft lights from the village below twinkled like earthly constellations, and the air was sweet with the scent of night-blooming flowers. In that profound quiet, she felt a deep and certain peace. Their great, world-mending adventure was complete, its final chapter lovingly preserved in Lyra's tapestry and the silent chronicle of the story stone. Yet she understood this was not an ending. The gentle, magical work of guardianship, the daily mending of small cracks, and the nurturing of new hearts like Finn's, was a journey that would never truly end. For every mended rune was its own small legend, and every act of quiet care wove a new thread into the everlasting, cozy tale of their world.
you.